They came to our aid, and humanity repaid them beyond measure. The Krell swarm emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare, made real. Minji watched from the command ship as sensors detected thousands of contacts. No, not thousands. Tens of thousands. The machines poured into Valori space in an endless stream of dark metal and malevolent purpose. Each unit was roughly the size of a human destroyer, covered in weapons and harvesting equipment. They moved in perfect coordination, a single mind controlling countless bodies. Deploy the fleet, Admiral Taijin ordered. The United Earth Defense Fleet had arrived at Valora Prime 2 months earlier. 150 warships, representing the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. They had trained relentlessly, studied every piece of data about the swarm, and prepared as best they could. It wasn't going to be enough. Everyone knew it. But they were here anyway. Hyunwoo monitored the weapon systems from the engineering bay of the flagship Promise Keeper. His team had worked miracles in the past year, developing new technologies based on both human innovation and Valori principles. They had kinetic weapons that could punch through thick armor, energy disruptors that scrambled electronic systems, and most importantly, they had adapted the Valori shield technology into something offensive. The silence bombs, as they called them, created zones where quantum communication couldn't function. If the swarm units relied on networked intelligence, cutting them off from each other might give humanity an advantage. But it was all theory. Until the battle actually started, they wouldn't know if any of it worked. The swarm ignored the human fleet at first. Heading straight for Valora Prime, their objective was clear: harvest the planet's resources and add them to the collective mass of machines. Everything else was irrelevant. Jinwoo commanded the destroyer Unbroken Promise, one of the newest ships in the fleet. His crew was young, most of them volunteers who had grown up hearing stories of the Valori's kindness. They wore their purpose like armor. All ships, engage at will, Taijin commanded. The human fleet opened fire. Missiles streaked through space. Energy weapons lanced out in brilliant colors. Kinetic rounds accelerated to relativistic speeds. The first salvo hit the leading edge of the swarm with devastating effect. Dozens of machines shattered into fragments. For a moment, hope flared. Maybe they could do this. Then the swarm returned fire and hope died. The machines' weapons were brutally efficient. They didn't waste energy on shields or fancy technology. They simply fired solid projectiles at incredible velocities, overwhelming defenses through sheer volume. 3 human ships died in the first exchange, torn apart by the relentless barrage. Evasive maneuvers, Jinwoo shouted as his ship twisted through space. Projectiles screamed past, some missing by meters. One clipped the port stabilizer, sending alarms shrieking. But they stayed in the fight. Sujin coordinated the medical response from the hospital ship's sanctuary. Casualties began arriving immediately. Wounded sailors transferred from damaged vessels, some injured so badly she could barely save them. The Valori medical technology helped, but it couldn't work miracles between surgeries. She contacted Dawn Singer on the planet below. "Are your people safe?" "We are evacuating to the underground shelters," Dawn Singer replied. Her voice was calm despite the chaos. "Thank you for coming. We never asked this of you." "We know," Sujin said, then rushed back to surgery. The battle raged for hours. The human fleet used hit-and-run tactics, never staying still long enough for the swarm to target effectively. Jinwoo led his squadron in close, firing at point-blank range before peeling away. They were insects attacking a giant, but every shot counted. Hyunwoo deployed the first silence bomb near a concentrated group of swarm units. The device detonated in a pulse of exotic particles, creating a spherical zone where quantum communication failed. The machines inside the zone suddenly became uncoordinated, their movements jerky and confused. "It works!" Someone shouted in the engineering bay. The human ships focused fire on the disconnected machines, destroying them before the effect wore off. It proved the concept. If they could disrupt the swarm's communication, they could fight it, but they needed more bombs. Hundreds more. And they had only brought 20. Taijin made a hard decision. All ships, fall back to defensive positions around Valora Prime. Establish a perimeter. We protect the planet. The fleet repositioned, forming a protective shell around the Valori homeworld. The swarm crashed against them like waves against rocks. Ship after ship took damage. The destroyer, Resilient Dawn, lost power and drifted, firing weapons on battery backup until its ammunition ran out. The cruiser, Starlight Guardian, took a hit to its reactor and had to be evacuated before it exploded. But the line held. Nari, a tactical officer aboard the flagship, analyzed the battle patterns. She noticed something important. The swarm wasn't learning. It used the same attack patterns over and over, only varying them slightly. It was smart, but not creative. It couldn't adapt quickly to unexpected tactics. "Admiral," she reported, "the swarm is predictable. If we can stay unpredictable, we can hold them longer than expected." Taijin seized on this insight. He ordered the fleet to randomize their tactics. One moment they would fight defensively. The next, they would charge aggressively. They would feign attacks on one flank while striking on another. They turned the battle into chaos, and chaos was something humans understood. The swarm DIDN single quotes T.days blurred into weeks. The battle became a grinding war of attrition. Earth sent reinforcements, but it took time for ships to travel the distance. More crew died. More ships were damaged or destroyed. But the Valori homeworld remained safe, protected by the stubborn courage of humanity. Minji worked around the clock analyzing swarm behavior, looking for weaknesses. She discovered that the machines had a central nexus ship, larger than the others, that coordinated major strategic decisions. If they could destroy it, the swarm would lose cohesion, but the nexus stayed in the back, protected by thousands of other units. Getting to it would require a suicide run. "I'll do it," Jinwoo volunteered immediately. "Absolutely not," Taijin said. "I need you here." "We all knew this might require sacrifice," Jinwoo replied calmly. "The Valori saved us without counting the cost. We have to do the same." In the end, 50 ships volunteered for the mission. 50 crews who understood they were flying to their deaths. They said goodbye to their friends, recorded messages for their families. Then they loaded their ships with every explosive they could carry and prepared to punch through the swarm. Hinwoo personally inspected each ship, making sure the weapons were at peak efficiency. He shook hands with each crew member, looking them in the eye. "Thank you," he said simply. What else was there to say? Sujin blessed each volunteer who came through the medical bay. She wasn't religious, but the gesture seemed important. These people were giving everything. The least she could do was acknowledge their sacrifice. The attack launched at dawn, Valora Prime time. 50 human ships accelerated to maximum velocity and drove straight into the heart of the swarm. The machines responded immediately. Thousands of units converging on the attackers. The human ships didn't try to dodge. They didn't try to survive. They simply flew straight ahead, weapons blazing, buying distance with their lives. Jinwoo's ship, Unbroken Promise, led the formation. Alarms screamed as damage mounted. His crew worked their stations even as the ship came apart around them. Port weapons offline. Shields failing. Hull breaches on 3 decks. None of it mattered. They only needed to last a little longer. Target acquired, Jinwoo reported calmly. The Nexus ship loomed ahead, a dark mountain of hostile metal. All ships, fire everything. 50 ships unleashed their payloads simultaneously. Missiles, bombs, energy weapons, and kinetic rounds all converged on a single point. The Nexus ship's defenses tried to respond, but there was too much, too fast, from too many angles. The explosions could be seen from Valora Prime, a brief star igniting in the darkness of space. When the light faded, the Nexus ship was gone. So were all 50 human vessels, thought the swarm reeled. Without central coordination, the machines began to fight less effectively. They still attacked, but their movements were slower, more confused. Taijin seized the opportunity. All ships press the attack. Drive them back. The remaining Earth fleet surged forward. They hit the disorganized swarm with everything they had. Slowly, impossibly, the machines began to retreat. Not far, just repositioning to recover. But it was movement backward, and that was a victory. More reinforcements arrived from Earth. Fresh ships. New weapons. And crucially, hundreds more silence bombs based on Hyomu's successful design. The battle for Valora Prime raged for 3 months total. Humanity lost 60 ships and over 2 million volunteers. But Valora Prime stood intact. The Valori people survived, protected by the stubborn courage of the species they had once saved. On the planet below, Dawn Singer stood with her people and watched the stars. Somewhere up there, humans were dying to protect them. It went against everything the Valori believed about not causing harm, but it also proved something beautiful. It proved that kindness could inspire courage, that compassion could breed loyalty, that helping others created bonds stronger than any treaty. The Valori had given humanity life. Now humanity was giving that gift back, and across the galaxy, others spec. They came to our aid, and humanity repaid them beyond measure. The war changed when other species arrived. Nari stood on the bridge of the command ship and watched as new contacts appeared on sensors. Not human ships. Not swarm machines. Something else entirely. She held her breath, wondering if these newcomers were friends or more enemies. Then the communication came through. This is the Torvan Confederacy. We have been watching your battle. You fight to save those who saved you. This honor moves us. We offer our assistance. Within days, 6 different species joined the fight. Some brought powerful weapons. Others offered advanced shields. One species specialized in electronic warfare and could hack into swarm systems directly. They had all heard the story of humanity's sacrifice and decided they couldn't stand aside. The swarm had always won before because they faced single species fighting alone, overwhelmed and isolated. But now they faced something new, a coalition bound not by treaties, but by shared purpose. United not by fear, but by the example humanity had set. Hyunwoo coordinated the combined engineering efforts, merging technologies from 8 different species into coherent battle plans. It was chaos at first. Everyone had different standards, different approaches, different philosophies. But they made it work because the alternative was failure. The Torvan were a warrior culture who valued courage above all else. They looked at humanity's suicidal defense of the Valori and saw kindred spirits. Their ships were heavily armored and carried devastating close-range weapons. They taught human crews new boarding tactics. The Ilum were energy beings who could interface directly with computer systems. They showed Minji how to track swarm communication patterns more effectively, revealing weak points in their network. The Catherine were master strategists who had survived the swarm once before by fleeing. They were ashamed they had run, but grateful for a chance to fight back with allies. They provided intelligence and tactical analysis. Together, the coalition began pushing the swarm back. Not just defending anymore, but actually winning territory. But everyone knew this was temporary. The swarm was vast. For every machine they destroyed, 10 more waited behind it. The main body of the swarm stretched across light years, and they had only faced its leading edge. Admiral Taijin called a strategy meeting with leaders from all species. The holographic display showed the scale of the problem. The swarm originated from a region of space 400 light-years away. At its heart was a massive construction facility that built new machines constantly. As long as that facility existed, the swarm would never truly be defeated. "We have to destroy the source," Jinwoo said. The young captain had survived a suicide run against the Nexus ship when his damaged vessel had been rescued by a Torvan cruiser. Now he stood with the scars of battle and the wisdom of survival. "It's too far," one of the Kethran strategists protested, "and too heavily defended. Any fleet we send would be destroyed before it arrived. Then, we send a fleet that doesn't care about coming back," Jinwoo replied quietly. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what he was proposing. Another suicide mission, but this time on a scale that dwarfed anything attempted before. Sujin attended the meeting via hologram from the hospital ship. She had lost count of how many lives she had saved, and how many she had watched slip away despite her best efforts. The war had hardened her, but it hadn't made her cruel. "How many ships would you need?" she asked the Jinwoo. 50 for the attack. Another 100 for escort to get us through the outer swarm defenses. We wouldn't need the escorts to return either. The more force we can bring to bear on the facility, the better our chances. 150 ships. Perhaps 1,000,000 volunteers, all knowing they would never see home again. "I'll lead it," Taijin said immediately. "No," Nari interrupted. "You're needed here to coordinate the defense." "I'll lead it." Arguments erupted. Everyone wanted to go. The Torvan offered their entire fleet. The Kethran wanted to prove they wouldn't run again. Even the Valori, peaceful as they were, offered to send ships. In the end, the strike force was assembled from volunteers of all species. 150 vessels crewed by beings who understood this was a one-way trip. They loaded the ships with every weapon, every bomb, every ounce of explosive material they could carry. Hyun-woo personally designed the final payload, a cascade bomb that would trigger a chain reaction in the swarm facility's power core. If it worked, the explosion would destroy everything within 100,000 kilometers. If it didn't, they would have died for nothing. Minji calculated the route and the timing. They would use a series of hyperspace jumps to bypass the main swarm forces, emerging directly at the facility. They would have maybe 10 minutes before the swarm could mount an effective response. That was their entire window. The fleet prepared to depart. Across a dozen worlds, people said goodbye to loved ones. Humans hugged their families. Torvan warriors performed their death rituals. Kethran scholars recorded their final thoughts. Everyone made peace with their fate. Jinwoo stood at the airlock of his new ship, the last light, and spoke with Sujin one final time via comm. "We're ready," he said. "I wish there was another way," she replied, tears in her eyes. "There isn't, but this is what we do, right? We save those who saved us. We fight for those who can't fight. We give everything because once, someone gave everything for us." The strike force departed from Valora Prime with an honor guard of ships from all allied species. They jumped into hyperspace and vanished, headed for the heart of the swarm. 4 days later, they emerged at their destination. The swarm facility was massive, a dark construct that churned out new machines every second. Hundreds of thousands of swarm units guarded it. The strike force barely registered as a threat. "All ships, attack formation," Nari commanded. She had insisted on leading despite her lack of seniority. Something about her calm determination made others trust her. The fleet formed a spear point with Jinwoo's ship at the tip. They accelerated to maximum velocity and drove straight toward the facility. The swarm responded. Thousands of machines moving to intercept. The battle was brief and brutal. Ships died in the first minute. Explosions lit up the darkness. The strike force pushed forward, buying distance with lives. 30 ships gone, 40, 50, but they were getting closer. Yinwu monitored from Valora Prime, watching the telemetry through the data link that would cut off when the ships were destroyed. He saw the moment Jinwu's ship took critical damage. Saw the young captain keep flying despite alarms that must have been deafening. 500 kilometers to target, Jinwu reported, his voice steady despite everything. 400. 300. More ships died. The Torvan vessels fought with ferocious pride, taking dozens of swarm units with them. The Kethrin used their knowledge to exploit every weakness. The human ships simply refused to stop. 100 kilometers. Deploying payload. Jinwu's ship, barely holding together, released the cascade bomb. It fell toward the facility like a tiny star. Swarm weapons tried to destroy it, but the other ships provided cover, sacrificing themselves to protect the bomb. Detonation in 10 seconds, Jinwu said. It's been an honor serving with all of you. The communication cut off. Yunwu closed his eyes. 400 light years away, the cascade bomb reached the swarm facility and detonated. The chain reaction was exactly as predicted. The facility's power core went critical. The explosion propagated through the entire structure, triggering secondary detonations that grew exponentially. When it ended, the heart of the swarm was gone. So were all 150 ships of the strike force. The effect was immediate. Across the galaxy, swarm units began to fail. Without new machines being built, without central coordination, the swarm started to collapse. The remaining units were still dangerous, but they were finite now, defeatable. The coalition forces went on the offensive. Over the next year, they hunted down every swarm unit they could find. It was hard, costly work, but it was possible now because of the sacrifice made at the facility. When the last confirmed swarm unit was destroyed, celebrations erupted across dozens of worlds. But on Earth and Valora Prime, people mourned the millions who had died to make victory possible. Sujin helped establish memorials on both worlds. Simple monuments that listed every name of every person who had volunteered to fight. Human names, beside Valori names, beside Torvan names, and all the others. Hai and Wu, now elderly and gray, helped design the central memorial on Valora Prime. It was a sculpture of two hands clasped together, one human and one Valori. Light shone through the crystal, casting rainbow colors on the ground below. The inscription read, "They came to our aid when darkness fell upon us. We repaid them beyond measure, for what greater gift than to live for one another." Taijin, who had survived the war, taught at the new Galactic Academy. Students from 40 species came to learn about cooperation, sacrifice, and the bonds that formed when beings chose to help each other despite the cost. The galaxy had changed. Species that had once ignored each other's suffering now rushed to offer aid. The swarm had threatened everyone, but humanity's example showed what was possible when people stood together. The Galactic community formed officially 10 years after the war. Not an empire or a military alliance, but a true community based on mutual support. When one world faced crisis, they came to our aid, and humanity repaid them beyond measure. Ships appeared on a Tuesday morning without warning. Minji was drinking coffee when every sensor in the observatory went completely insane. Massive objects had just materialized in Earth's orbit. Not asteroids, not comets, ships. Enormous ships that made humanity's largest vessels look like toys. She dropped her cup and ran to the main display. The images coming through were impossible. 12 massive structures hung in space above Earth, each one easily 30 kilometers long. They were beautiful, made of some silvery metal that caught the sunlight and reflected it in rainbow colors. Are they hostile? Someone shouted. I don't know, Minji replied. They're just sitting there. Every military on Earth went to high alert. Weapon systems came online. Fighter craft scrambled. But what could humanity do against ships that size? If they wanted to destroy Earth, there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. Hyunwoo received the emergency call and rushed to the command center. The room buzzed with tension. Generals argued about response options. Politicians demanded answers nobody had. In the middle of it all stood a young communications officer, her hand shaking as she held out a headset. Sir, she said, they're broadcasting something. On all frequencies. I think it's a message. Yanwoo took the headset. At first, he heard only static and strange musical tones. Then a voice emerged, speaking perfect Korean, then English, then Mandarin, cycling through every language on Earth. People of Earth, we are the Valori. We have been watching your world from afar. We have seen your crisis. We have come to help. The room fell silent. Help? Yanwoo repeated into the comm. Who are you? Why would you help us? The response came quickly. We are travelers, explorers. We have watched your species grow and learn. We have seen your art, your music, your kindness to one another. When we detected the stellar anomaly affecting your sun, we could not stand by and watch you perish. We ask your permission to deploy a shield network around your planet. Taijin, recalled from the evacuation fleet, stood in the emergency council meeting. World leaders appeared on screens around the room, their faces showing a mixture of hope and fear. It could be a trap, the American president said. What would be the point? Taijin responded, we're already dying. If they wanted Earth, they could just wait 90 days and take it. They're asking permission, Minji added, studying the data. They could have just done it. Instead, they're waiting for our answer. The vote took 3 hours. In the end, every nation agreed. What choice did they have? Accept possible help from aliens or certain death from the sun. The answer was obvious. Earth sent its reply. We accept your help. Thank you. The Valori responded immediately. The 12 massive ships began to move, spreading out around the planet in a perfect geometric pattern. From each ship, smaller craft emerged, carrying what looked like massive crystalline structures. These craft flew to specific points in orbit and began assembling something. Hyunwoo watched through telescopes as the Valori worked. Their technology was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The crystalline structures connected to each other with beams of pure light. Within 6 hours, they had created a glowing web that surrounded the entire planet. Then the web activated. A shimmer passed through space, like heat waves on a summer day. Minji's sensors showed an energy field forming around Earth, extending out past the moon's orbit. It was a shield. A real working shield that wrapped the planet in protective energy. The next solar flare hit 12 hours later. It was the largest one yet, strong enough to have burned away half the atmosphere. Instead, it splashed against the Valori shield like water on glass. The energy dispersed harmlessly into space. Earth sat safe beneath its new protective shell. People poured into the streets, crying and laughing and hugging strangers. The sun couldn't hurt them anymore. They were going to live. Sujin was overwhelmed with patience, but now they were patients suffering from joy rather than despair. Still, the previous months had taken their toll. Millions suffered from radiation sickness. Hospitals overflowed with the sick and dying. 3 Valori ships descended to the surface and landed in designated areas. For the first time, humans saw the Valori themselves. They were tall and slender, with skin that shimmered in shades of blue and silver. Their faces were almost human, but not quite, with large eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They moved with impossible grace. The Valori brought medical technology with them. devices that could heal radiation damage at the cellular level. Within a week, Sujin watched patients who had been dying make full recoveries. The Valori doctors worked alongside human medical staff, showing them how to use the equipment and teaching them the principles behind it. "Why are you doing this?" Sujin asked one of the Valori physicians, a graceful being whose name translated roughly to Dawn Singer. Dawn Singer tilted her head in what might have been a smile. "Your people are suffering. We can help. Is there any other reason needed?" The answer was so simple, it made Sujin want to cry. Taijin led the diplomatic escort for Valori engineering teams visiting critical infrastructure sites. The aliens helped humans repair damage from the electromagnetic pulses. They shared technology for better power generation, water purification, and food production. But they did it carefully, teaching rather than simply giving. "We do not want you to become dependent on us," one Valori explained. "We want you to learn and grow stronger." Hyunwoo spent every waking moment studying the shield technology. The Valori allowed him and his team to examine the orbital platforms up close. What they saw made them feel like children looking at a master's work. The technology was centuries beyond human capability, maybe longer. "How does it work?" Hyunwoo asked the Valori engineer guiding the tour. "The shield generates a field that redistributes energy across multiple dimensions," the Valori explained. "The solar radiation enters the field, but emerges dispersed across a spectrum that cannot harm biological life." Hyunwoo understood maybe one word in 5, but he wrote everything down anyway. Someday, maybe, humanity would be able to build something like this themselves. Minji established a joint research station to study the stellar fragment that had caused the crisis. The Valori were fascinated by humanity's scientific curiosity. They shared their own data and helped humans understand the complex physics involved. Working together, they published papers that advanced human astrophysics by decades. Over the following months, cultural exchange began. Humans shared their music, and the Valori listened with what seemed like genuine appreciation. They shared their own art, beautiful sculptures made of light and sound that told stories without words. Human children sent drawings to Valori ships. Valori sent back gifts of flowers that bloomed in impossible colors. The Valori never asked for anything in return. When human governments offered payment or resources, they politely declined. "We have what we need," they said. "Your friendship is sufficient." It bothered people. Humanity owed these aliens everything. The entire species had been saved. How could they ever repay such a debt? "You owe us nothing," Dawn Singer told Sujin one day at the hospital. "We helped because it was right. That is all." But humans couldn't accept that. It went against everything they believed. Debts must be paid. Favors must be returned. To accept such a gift without repayment felt wrong. Hyunwoo voiced this concern to the Valori chief engineer during one of their sessions. "You saved our entire species. Billions of lives. How can we possibly repay you?" The Valori considered this for a long moment. "Perhaps you misunderstand the nature of kindness. We did not help you to create debt. We helped you because we could and because it was needed. If you wish to repay us, then live well, thrive, grow, become the best version of your species you can be. That is all we ask." It was a beautiful sentiment. But for humanity, it wasn't enough. They wanted to give something back. They needed to prove they were worthy of the gift they had received. The Valori stayed for 6 months, ensuring the shield network was stable and training humans to maintain it. They left behind engineers who could perform repairs and upgrades. They shared knowledge freely and asked nothing in return. On the day the Valori prepared to depart, millions of humans gathered to say goodbye. They brought gifts and flowers and artwork. Children sang songs. Adults gave speeches of gratitude that often ended in tears. the Valori accepted everything with grace and kindness. Their leader, speaking to a global audience, said simply, "We are glad we could help. May your sun shine gently upon you, and may your species flourish among the stars." The 12 great ships lifted from orbit and disappeared into the darkness of space. Heading home, Earth remained safe beneath the shield, a blue jewel wrapped in protective light. Humanity looked up at the stars and made a silent promise. Somehow, someday, they would repay this debt. They would prove worthy of the gift they had received. The question was how. They came to our aid, and humanity repaid them beyond measure. Han Wu stared at the screen in disbelief. The numbers made no sense. They couldn't be real. But he checked them 3 times, and each time the result was the same. The sun was dying, not in billions of years as it was supposed to. Not in some distant future when humanity would have long since spread across the stars. The sun was dying now, and Earth had maybe 6 months before the end. He sat back in his chair at the Global Defense Coalition building in Seoul and rubbed his tired eyes. As chief engineer, he had seen many crises. Equipment failures, power grid collapses, even the asteroid scare of 2239. But this was different. This was the end of everything. The door burst open and Minji rushed in, her face pale. The astrophysicist carried a tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "You've seen it," she said. It wasn't a question. "I've seen it," Himu confirmed. "A stellar fragment. Passed right through our solar system 3 weeks ago. We didn't even detect it until it was gone." Minji nodded and collapsed into the chair across from him. "It disrupted the sun's magnetic field. The core is unstable now. Solar flares are already starting. In a month, they'll be strong enough to strip away our atmosphere. In 2 months, the radiation will cook everything on the surface." They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside the window, Seoul gleamed in the afternoon sun. Millions of people went about their lives, unaware that the light warming their faces would soon kill them all. "Can we fix it?" Hyunwoo asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," Minji said softly. "We don't have the technology. Even if we did, we don't have the time. Evacuation? Where would we go? Our fastest ships can barely reach Mars. We have maybe 100 vessels that could carry people off-world. That's 1 million people, Hyunwoo. 1 million out of 10 billion. Hyunwoo felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He had always been a problem solver. Give him a broken machine, and he would fix it. Give him an impossible design, and he would make it work. But this, there was no fixing this. The news broke the next day. Governments around the world had tried to keep it quiet, but the truth had a way of getting out. Within hours, every screen on Earth showed the same terrible images. The sun's surface boiling with massive flares, solar storms brewing that would make the planet uninhabitable. Panic spread like wildfire. In some cities, riots broke out. In others, people simply sat in the streets and wept. Religious leaders spoke of the end times. Scientists gave grim press conferences. Politicians made empty promises about solutions that didn't exist. Captain Taijin of the evacuation fleet, New Dawn, stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the chaos below. His vessel was one of the lucky ones, rated for deep space travel. He had orders to begin selecting passengers for evacuation. But how do you choose? How do you decide who lives and who dies? The lottery system seemed cruel but fair. Random selection. No preferences for wealth or status. Just luck. Pure, simple, terrible luck. Taijin entered the names into the system and pressed the button. 10,000 names appeared. 10,000 people who would live while billions perished. He felt sick. Dr. Sujin worked 18-hour days at the medical center. The psychological impact of the announcement was immediate and devastating. Suicide rates spiked. People stopped going to work. Families huddled together, wanting to spend their final months with loved ones. She tried to help where she could, dispensing medication and comfort in equal measure. But what comfort could she offer? What words could ease the pain of knowing your children would die? Hyunwoo and his team worked frantically anyway. They couldn't accept defeat. There had to be something they could do. Some way to shield the planet. Some technology they had overlooked. They proposed building massive magnetic field generators at the poles. The engineers calculated it would take 5 years to construct. They had 6 months. They suggested launching reflective shields into orbit to deflect the solar radiation. The physicists ran the numbers and determined they would need materials that didn't exist and manufacturing capabilities they didn't possess. Every solution hit the same wall. Not enough time. Not enough resources. Not enough knowledge. Minji spent her nights in the observatory, watching the sun tear itself apart. The flares were beautiful in a terrible way. Great arcs of plasma reaching out into space like the fingers of a dying god. She recorded everything, thinking maybe future species would find Earth's remains and want to know what happened. A final message from humanity. We were here, and we tried. 3 months passed. The first major flare hit Earth's magnetic field and punched through like paper. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out power grids across Asia. Billions sat in darkness while emergency services scrambled to restore order. It was a preview of what was coming. The radiation levels began to climb. Not enough to kill yet, but enough to warn. People in equatorial regions started showing signs of radiation sickness. Sujin's medical centers overflowed with patients. She worked until she collapsed from exhaustion, then woke up and worked some more. Taijin's evacuation fleet prepared for launch. The selected passengers began arriving at the spaceports, carrying whatever they could in single bags. Families said goodbye to relatives who hadn't won the lottery. The scenes were heartbreaking. Fathers putting children on ships, knowing they would never see them again. Mothers staying behind so their daughters could live. Hyunwoo stopped working on solutions. There were none. Instead, he spent his time writing letters to people he cared about, saying the things he had never said. Making peace with the end, the world fell into a strange calm. After the initial panic, people simply accepted their fate. They gathered with loved ones. They said their goodbyes. They watched the sun set each evening and wondered how many more sunsets they would see. Minji calculated they had 90 days left. Maybe less if the next flare was particularly strong. She stopped going to the observatory. There was nothing more to learn. Instead, she went home and sat with her parents, drinking tea and talking about old memories. Sujin organized hospice care for the entire planet. Since everyone would die anyway, she focused on making the end as peaceful as possible. Comfort measures, pain management, dignity in death. Taijin delayed the launch as long as he could, trying to give people more time with their families. But eventually, the order came. The fleet had to leave before the radiation made space travel impossible. He gave the command with tears in his eyes. The ships lifted off from Earth carrying their precious cargo of survivors. Below them, 10 billion people stood and watched them go. Hyunwoo stood on the roof of the Seoul facility and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, humanity would continue. A tiny fragment of what they had been, but alive. It would have to be enough. The sun rose the next morning, swollen and angry and red. It had 90 more days left to give. Earth would make the most of them. They came to our aid and humanity repaid them beyond measure 5 years after the Valori saved Earth. Humanity was unrecognizable. The near extinction event had changed everything. Old hatreds between nations seemed petty and meaningless when everyone had almost died together. Borders mattered less. Resources were shared more freely, For the first time in history, Earth was truly united. Hai and Wu walked through the new Global Science Institute in Seoul, marveling at how much had changed. Scientists from every nation worked side by side, studying Valori technology and pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. His own team had made breakthroughs in energy generation and material science. Not at the Valori level, not yet, but closer than anyone had thought possible. Still trying to unlock their secrets? A young voice asked. Yumu turned to see Jinwoo, his brightest student. The young engineer had grown up during the crisis, experiencing the terror of near extinction and the wonder of alien salvation. His generation saw the universe differently than those who came before. Every day, Yumu admitted. But the more I learn, the more I realize how far ahead they are. It would take us centuries to develop what they gave us in weeks. Jinwoo nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's the wrong approach. Maybe we shouldn't try to match their technology. Maybe we should focus on what humans do best. And what's that? Adapting, surviving, innovating under pressure. Jinwoo gestured to the lab around them. We've made more progress in 5 years than we did in the previous 50. Because we had to. Because we wanted to prove ourselves worthy. The words struck Hyungwoo deeply. The young engineer was right. Humanity had changed in fundamental ways. They weren't just rebuilding. They were transforming. Su Jin ran the first human Valori Medical Research Institute, a gleaming building in Geneva where doctors from both species worked together. The collaboration had produced incredible advances in healing and disease prevention. Human lifespans had already increased by an average of 15 years. She still corresponded regularly with Dawn Singer, who had returned to the Valori homeworld. They shared research and insights across the light years. Sometimes they just talked about life and philosophy. Sujin had learned that the Valori valued friendship as much as any human did. How can we ever repay you? Sujin had asked in one message. Dawn Singer's reply came weeks later, delayed by the vast distance. You already have. Your gratitude warms us. Your friendship honors us. Your progress inspires us. What more could we ask? But it didn't feel like enough. Not to Sujin. Not to anyone. Taijin commanded regular diplomatic missions to Valora Prime, the Valori homeworld. The trips took months, even with the advanced engines the Valori had helped humans build. Each visit deepened the relationship between the two species. The Valori homeworld was beautiful beyond description. Cities of light and crystal grew from the landscape like natural formations. The Valori lived in harmony with their environment in ways humans were only beginning to understand. They were a peaceful species. Philosophers and artists and scientists who had long ago abandoned war and violence. During his latest visit, Taijin walked through the crystal gardens with a Valori elder. The alien moved slowly, its age showing in the dimming of its luminescent skin. Your people seem troubled, the elder observed. You carry a weight that we do not understand. Taijin struggled to explain. You saved us. All of us. And you ask for nothing in return. In human culture, this creates a debt. We must repay you somehow. The elder's eyes reflected sadness. We understand debt differently. To us, helping others is not a transaction. It is simply what beings should do for one another. But we want to give back, Taijin insisted. We want to prove we deserved your help. You have already proven that by choosing to live well and grow. But if it eases your hearts, then continue to grow. Become strong. Learn everything you can. Perhaps one day you will help another species as we helped you. That would be repayment enough. It was wise counsel. But Taijin couldn't shake the feeling that humanity needed to do more. Minji spent her time analyzing deep space telemetry from the network of sensors Earth had deployed since the crisis. Knowledge was power, and humans wanted to know what was out there. The galaxy had proven itself full of wonders and dangers. One night, she detected something unusual. Strange quantum signatures coming from a region far beyond Valori space. The patterns were chaotic, destructive, unlike anything natural. She ran the data through every filter she had, and each time the conclusion was the same: something was out there. Something massive. Something heading in the Valori's direction. She sent her findings to the Valori Science Council and waited for their response. When it came 3 weeks later, her blood ran cold. The Valori confirmed her discovery. They had detected it themselves, but had hoped they were wrong. The quantum signatures matched records from an ancient database. A warning passed down from a civilization that no longer existed. The Krell swarm was coming. Humu attended the emergency meeting in the United Earth Assembly. Leaders from every nation gathered, along with Valori representatives who had traveled to Earth specifically for this discussion. The holographic displays showed the swarm's projected path. It would reach Valori space in approximately 1 year. What is the Krell swarm? Someone asked. The Valori representative, a scientist named Evening Bloom, explained in a quiet voice. They are machines. Ancient, self-replicating machines that consume everything they encounter. They strip entire star systems of resources to build more of themselves. In the past century, they have destroyed 6 known civilizations. The room fell silent. How do you fight them? Taijin asked. Evening Bloom's skin dimmed with sorrow. We do not know. No species has successfully defended against them. Those who tried were destroyed. Those who fled survived only if they ran far enough and fast enough. And you? Yanwu demanded. What will you do? We have begun evacuation procedures, Evening Bloom said softly. We will abandon our homeworld and flee to the outer reaches of the galaxy. It is our only hope for survival. The humans in the room stared in shock. The Valori were giving up their home, a world they had inhabited for over 10,000 years. They would become refugees, scattered among the stars. Sujin felt tears on her face. The Valori had saved humanity without hesitation. Now they faced extinction, and their plan was just to run away. It seemed wrong. It seemed unbearable. There must be something we can do, she said. Evening Bloom looked at her with those mirror-like eyes. Your kindness touches us, but this is not your fight. You owe us nothing. You have already given us friendship, which is more than we expected. Please, if you can, take some of our people as refugees. Help preserve our culture and knowledge. That is all we ask. That night, protests erupted across Earth. Millions of humans took to the streets with a simple message: we will not abandon them. A movement had begun. People called it, the debt must be paid. But it was about more than debt. It was about loyalty, about friendship, about refusing to stand by while those who saved you were destroyed. Jinwu stood before the assembly and spoke for his generation. The Valori gave us life when we had none. They gave us hope when all seemed lost. They asked for nothing and gave everything. Now they face the end, and they still ask for nothing. But we are not nothing. We are humanity. We survived because they helped us. Now it's our turn to help them. The applause started small but grew until the entire chamber shook with it. Hyunwoo presented a proposal to the Valori Council. Let us study the swarm. Let us find a weakness. Let humanity stand with you. You do not understand, Evening Bloom protested. The swarm is unstoppable. Your ships, your weapons, everything you have built, it will mean nothing against them. We cannot ask you to throw your lives away. You're not asking, Taijin said firmly. We're offering. The Valori saved us. Now we save you. It's that simple. The vote in the United Earth Assembly was unanimous. Humanity would go to war to protect the Valori. Not because they had to. Not because they were asked. but because it was right. Preparations began immediately. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels switched to military production. Scientists who had been researching peaceful technology turned their minds to weapons and defense. The entire planet mobilized for war. The Valari watched in amazement as humanity transformed itself once again. But they also watched with sadness, knowing what was coming. Minji continued tracking the swarm's approach. Her calculations showed it would reach Valora Prime in 11 months. That gave humanity less than a year to prepare for a war against an enemy that had never been defeated. The odds were impossible. The experts all agreed humanity would lose, but humanity had faced impossible odds before. They had stared into the dying light of their own sun and survived. They had been given a second chance, and they weren't going to waste it sitting safely behind their shield. While their friends died, the debt wasn't about obligation anymore. It was about being worthy of the gift they had received. It was about proving that humanity deserved to survive. And if they had to fight an unstoppable enemy to prove it, then they would fight.